Hey, I'm here with South Brunswick star senior Morgan Murray. What is the strength of this team and the key to what enabled you guys to win this?
You got to want the win, no matter who's in front of you, what they've run before. You just got to go in with the mindset that you got to catch them if you have a deficit. You got to hold the lead if you have the lead. No matter who's around you, so you got to win.
Hey, you heard it from Morgan Murray. Helped lead South Brunswick to their second straight state Group 4 relay title. Congrats, Morgan.
Thank you.
With the sort of 1,000-foot view that I have now of my collegiate running experience and even my high school experience, I can pretty clearly see the mindsets that I had that were beneficial to me in certain contexts that aren't really beneficial for me now and weren't beneficial for me in the long run. One of the mantras that I would take into most workouts that I was doing with my teammates was, hey, we suffer now so we don't suffer later. Grind through the pain of this workout that you're doing so that you didn't feel the disappointment of losing a race or not PRing. There was only going to be a reward if I was suffering. And probably one of the more profound realizations I've had about my mindset in high school and in college was that my drive to compete was much more externally driven than I had thought. I always thought of myself as internally motivated. I never needed somebody to be over my shoulder making sure that I'm doing my workouts or over my shoulder making sure that I'm getting my runs in. But I failed to realize that I was mostly externally driven for validation from others. I wanted to be the best runner in the state of New Jersey, in the US, not necessarily for me, but more for the approval of everyone else. Somebody asked me recently if I was getting back into running specifically to become elite again. That's not really why I'm in this. This whole thing is just an experiment. I just want to see if I can use my knowledge of the training literature and training science to support my development and see if there is kind of a template to follow. So let's talk about my training up to this point. Now, I mentioned in that first Running Again video that I want to follow a 4 to 5 year plan. Now, what I'm going to do in the first 2 to 3 years is focus on building my endurance. One of the things that I never really had was a really solid foundation. I was a low mileage guy and I thought that that was the key to my success. Knowing what I know now, I think that the reason I felt that way was because I was approaching my volume building in a very irresponsible way. What I'm gonna do is focus on building my volume and my endurance base by targeting longer distance events. So really, I'm gonna focus on running half marathons in this first 2 to 3 year period of time. Now, I already ran my first half, and that was in April at Jersey City. I'm gonna spend the rest of this video really talking about the training that I did leading up to the Jersey City half and how my mindset shifts really influenced that training approach. I'm gonna put up a sort of broad scoping display of my Strava data from December up through to April, showing you my heart rates and my average pace for every run I did leading up to the Jersey City half. So in this plot here, what you're looking at is the date on the bottom, x-axis. On the left, you've got my heart rates, and then on the right-hand side, you've got my pace. And what you can see is that from December all the way to April, my heart rates averaged out to be 130 to 160, and my pace went down from about 10 minutes per mile all the way down to say 8 to 9 minutes per mile. Now, the reason that my heart rate was mainly in that 130 to 160 range is because what I did to get back into running is I followed something called the MAF method. That's M-A-F. It's short for maximal aerobic function. So there's the MAF formula, which is 180 minus your age. And what that tries to do is put you in and around your first lactate threshold and or in and around your maximal fat oxidation rate. It's not going to be perfect, but it does wind up creating a workable framework for you that will get you in the ballpark. So for me, the Maffetone method, 180 minus your age, put me at a heart rate of around 153 beats and basically had that be my cap. But a helpful way to also look at how my fitness was changing is to look at specific key sessions that I was doing. So if I just took out all of the workouts that I did and took out really all the long runs that I was doing, this is what my easy run heart rate and pace looked like. Again, here you see a very similar trend. You see my heart rates pretty much being consistent, and then you see that my average pace for each run went from around that 10-minute mark down towards 9 and even 8 minutes per mile. When you look at my long runs, you can also see the same trend. My heart rate stays right around that 152 BPM range, and my pace goes from around the 10:30 mark all the way down to 8 to 9 minutes. You can see a pretty big gap in March, and that was because I ended up getting the flu and was just like sick as a dog and couldn't really do anything. So that kind of explains that little missing window there. You can really start to see how my fitness was progressing over time, just really following the MAF method. Now, my maximum heart rate, especially at this time, is about 205 beats per minute. So what that means for me is that most of my runs were done in that 60 to 75% of my maximum heart rate range. If I look at all of the sessions that I did, I'm splitting them into two types. I've got my easy and long runs because most of those were done at very similar heart rates. And then I've got workouts. Now, these workouts were just sessions that I did that might have been, say, 10 to 20 minutes steady, or maybe 4 to 5 times 6 minutes at what I would have thought was my half marathon pace to just try to get me to like prepare for the Jersey City half. When I look at my training through that lens, I can start to break down the training into the percentage of sessions that were done as easy/long runs and the percentage that were done as workouts. And the breakdown ends up being about 85% of the sessions were easy and or long runs, and about 15% of the sessions that I did were workouts. Because workout sessions are not just exclusively, say, high intensity or fast paced, what I then did was I looked at how much time was spent at relatively low intensities, like low heart rates that would put me less than my first lactate threshold, and how much of that time was spent above that first lactate threshold. When I break the training down in this way, the differences between my training sessions becomes that much more apparent. I was spending about 95% of my training time in that 60 to 75% heart rate max range, and then the remaining 5% above that. I distributed my training intensity like this for two different reasons. One being that I wanted to make sure that as I started running again, I could do it in a way that was fun, but also in a way that would put me at a very low risk of getting injured, since injuries were a common part of my training history. But number two is that when you look at the training intensity distributions of elite and world-class athletes, they tend to follow something very similar. I just wanted to try to see if following that sort of model could be useful for me. And to understand exactly how I got to this training breakdown, I think it would be useful to just take a look at my Strava training log. So what I'm gonna do is show exactly what I was doing from the start in December. So you can see, from September, October, all the way up to November, I wasn't doing anything at all. And then starting December 4th, I began running, mainly because on that Saturday, we ended up running the Big Chill at Rutgers, which is just a community 5K. From there, I really just focused on using the MAF method to get myself back into the swing of things, and I decided to run 5 days a week. So what I would do is Monday would be off, Tuesday would be a MAF run, Wednesday would end up being some kind of a workout, Thursday would be another MAF run or recovery run, Friday I took off, Saturday MAF run, Sunday would be some kind of a long run. So if I look at that first week here, Tuesday, the 19th of December, I ended up running about 4 miles, 40 minutes at about 10 minutes per mile. My heart rate got up to about 150 beats per minute. Then that Wednesday, I ended up doing 20 minutes at about 165 heart rate. Thursday, I went 40 minutes, nice and easy around that MAF heart rate. Friday was off. Saturday, I ended up going about 4 miles again. And then that Sunday, ended up doing a long run of about 70 minutes. So I went 7 miles, just about a 10:30 pace and 145 beats per minute. And that really kept on going from December all the way up through to February until I got to the first week of March, which, like I said, I ended up getting the flu. But then coming out of that, I ended up getting back into the swing of things before ultimately running the Jersey City half marathon in a time of 1:29:24, which is an average of about 6:50 per mile. I went into that race not really knowing what to expect because I'd never run that far and that fast. So my plan was to start off relatively conservative and then just kind of work from there and see what I was capable of. So I started at about 7 minutes and then gradually picked it up and ultimately closed the last 4 miles in the 6:30 to 6:40 range. Many of my workouts ended up being usually actually below what ended up being my half marathon pace. So let's see, at random, I did 4 by 6 minutes at half marathon pace with 1 minute break on March 27th. And these were around 720 per mile. If I look at the heart rates for this, it looks like I was probably around 170, 172. I know now that that's actually the boundary at my first lactate threshold, but I basically just repeated that a handful of times. There was nothing particularly complicated that got me to the Jersey City half healthy and still in shape. A lot of easy running lots of just building up some volume and then sprinkling in workouts here and there. And there's going to be nothing particularly complicated that's going to have kept me healthy to this point and gotten me in better shape. Now, one thing I do want to comment on is that this approach of such a marked difference between my percentage of time at easy running and percentage of time with hard running may not be the answer for most people. It really does depend on the specifics of your situation. And there is something to be said for the fact that I was formerly trained, but we have to keep in mind that I hadn't trained for about 4 to 5 years. The key thing to understand is that prior training status does affect how rapidly you'll see improvement, and it's easier to get back somewhere that you've been than it was to get there in the first place. But 4 to 5 years of detraining is a lot of time. So exactly how much that played a part in my rapid progression from December to April, I don't know. But what's going to be really interesting is seeing how that progress continues or doesn't continue moving forward following the same fundamental principles. I'm pretty confident that it's going to continue, and I'm pretty confident that I'm going to end up in the best shape of my life. But that's it for this video. If you guys liked it, if you got something out of it, please just give a like, drop a comment, and maybe subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you guys on the next one.